The rain hammered against the glass like tiny fists, furious and relentless. The sky was black, save for the occasional streak of lightning that illuminated the city's skyline like an open wound. I remember that night clearly, because that was the night I realized my sister never saw me as her equal. "Lena," she said, her voice smooth as silk but cold as steel, "you don't belong here." I stood at the far end of the long mahogany conference table, the scent of expensive leather and fresh coffee heavy in the air. 12 board members turned their heads between us, their expressions unreadable, like spectators at a duel they already knew the outcome of. I tried to steady my voice. "I grew up in this company too, Elise. Father trained us both." She tilted her head with the kind of pity that doesn't comfort, it cuts. "He trained me to lead. You were always better at following." There it was. A clean stab straight to the ribs. The family business, Bastille Imports, was our father's empire. A shipping and luxury trade company built from nothing, turning into a multimillion-dollar machine by the time we were born. Elise, my older sister by 5 years, had always been the golden child, eloquent, charismatic, effortlessly commanding. I was the quieter one, more of a strategist than a speaker. But when father died, the board voted her in as CEO without a second thought. I stayed on as chief operations officer, the workhorse behind her glamorous public image. And now in this thunder-soaked night, she was ending even that. "Elise," I whispered, "you can't just push me out." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. Her diamond anklet glinted as the light flickered. "Actually, I can. The board has already approved the restructuring. Operations will be outsourced. You'll receive a generous severance package." A severance package. Like I was some stranger who had stumbled into the company rather than the woman who spent 12 years building it from the inside. The room blurred for a second, my throat tightening. Every instinct screamed to fight back. But I remembered father's words years ago. "Power is quiet, Lena. Let them underestimate you. That's how you strike." I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Of course, Elise," I said evenly. "I wouldn't want to stand in your way." She seemed almost disappointed I didn't beg. "Good. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork in the morning." As I turned to leave, the only sound was the echo of my heels against the marble floor and the distant roll of thunder. When I pushed the glass doors open, cold rain lashed against my face, mixing with the sting in my eyes. I walked aimlessly through the storm, every drop burning like a reminder. "You're out." She won. But deep down beneath the heartbreak, something colder, sharper began to stir. She thought I was out of the game. But she had no idea that the very system she sat on was one I had built piece by piece. By the time I reached my apartment, soaked and shivering, I had already opened my laptop. For years, Elise was the face of Bastille Imports, but I had been the hands. I knew its arteries, its deals, its ledgers, its offshore accounts, and I knew where its heart was weakest. A single notification blinked at the corner of my screen. Suspicious wire activity came in holdings. I leaned forward, my fingers tightening around the mouse. Elise had made a move, a big one. I wasn't going to let her bury me. No, I was going to dig first. The morning sun mocked me with its brightness. My apartment smelled faintly of burnt coffee and adrenaline. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night digging through financial records, tracing Elise's latest deal like a hunter following blood in the snow. $40 million. She'd convinced the bank to extend the company's credit line for a bold new expansion. On paper, it was genius. High risk, high reward. But I knew the numbers better than anyone. Bastille was stretched thin. One wrong move and the entire empire would collapse, and Elise, she was gambling everything to prove she could win without me. My phone buzzed, a name flashed, Marcus C. I hesitated before answering. Marcus Cole was one of father's oldest partners, a man with too much power and too many secrets. "Lena," his gravelly voice came through. "I hear you're no longer at the table. News travels fast," I said bitterly. He chuckled darkly. "In this world, betrayal is a headline. What do you want, Marcus?" "Not what I want, what I know." He paused. "Your sister's deal with Keystone Bank isn't as clean as she thinks." My pulse quickened. "Explain." "There are whispers," he said. "Someone inside Bastille falsified collateral statements to push the deal through. If the bank digs deeper, it's not just the credit line that gets frozen. It's the whole damn company." I swallowed hard. Elise always played dangerously close to the fire, but falsifying collateral, that wasn't bold. That was reckless. What's in it for you, Marcus? Nothing. He laughed softly, except the satisfaction of watching a Bastille queen fall. I ended the call and leaned against the counter, staring at the city through the window. My mind was spinning. This was bigger than personal revenge now. If Bastille fell, thousands of employees would be caught in the flames. I opened a secure drive, a hidden vault I'd built years ago. Inside was every transaction, every offshore account, every shell company Elise thought she could bury. And tucked deep within was something I'd nearly forgotten, a set of irrevocable control triggers. Vale, Safe's father and I had created during the 2008 crash. Back then, he'd said, if this company ever falls into the wrong hands, these will stop the bleeding. Elise had laughed at the idea. I had memorized every line of code, but striking now meant war, not a quiet one, a public one. Elise would come after me with everything she had. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keys. Do it, a voice whispered. Show her who built this empire. My doorbell rang. When I opened it, a man in a black suit handed me a folder. Inside were legal documents, an NDA extension, a gag order, and a signed release of my severance payment. Elise wanted to shut me up quickly, but attached at the back was something else, a note in Elise's perfect handwriting. Something inside me snapped, not loudly but cleanly, like glass breaking under pressure. I burned the note, then I went back to the computer. By the time the sun reached its peak, I had already activated the first fail. Safe, not enough to cripple the company, but enough to freeze the automatic transfers that kept Elise's expansion dream alive. Within hours, she'd start to feel the cracks beneath her throne. As I sat in the glow of my laptop, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Marcus. It was Elise. Her voice, normally composed, was sharp and laced with panic. Lena, did you touch the control systems? I smiled slowly. Why would I? You said I don't belong. She exhaled shakily. The bank. They've flagged the credit line. Something's wrong. Maybe. I said softly. You should have thought about that before pushing me out. You don't understand. She snapped. This isn't just about me. Oh, I understand perfectly. Her silence told me she knew I'd made my first move. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was war. The news broke like thunder in a clear sky. Within 24 hours, reporters camped outside Bastille's headquarters. Investors panicked. Employees whispered in hallways, their faces pale with the dread of uncertainty. And Elise, for the first time in years, she looked small. I watched her press conference from the shadows of my living room. She stood behind a polished podium, perfectly dressed, but her hands trembled when she thought no one could see. She insisted the company was cooperating fully with the investigation. She smiled through gritted teeth, the mask of control slipping around the edges. I knew that look. That was the face of someone who realized the castle she built wasn't made of stone. It was made of glass. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, impressive. He said simply, "This isn't about impressing you." I muttered, "Maybe not, but the vultures are circling. Elise is vulnerable. If you want to save the company, this is your window." I hesitated. The company had betrayed me. My sister had humiliated me. A part of me wanted to watch it all burn. But then I thought of the night shifts, the loyal employees, the quiet pride in Father's eyes when he spoke of what we built. I couldn't let her destroy his legacy. The next morning I walked through the glass doors of Bastille headquarters. Heads turned as I entered, some shocked, some hopeful. My heels echoed through the marble lobby like a declaration of war. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor, Elise was waiting for me. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "And yet," I said, stepping forward, "here I am." Her office, once so commanding, felt smaller now. Messier, piles of documents littered the floor, a half. Drunk coffee sat on the edge of her desk, cold. She paced like a trapped animal. "Do you have any idea what you've done? They've frozen the line. We can't move a single cent. If this goes south, it's bankruptcy." "You did that," I said calmly. "You pushed a deal you couldn't back. You lied to the bank." Her eyes burned. "I did what I had to. Father never believed in me like he believed in you. I had to prove I could lead." The words struck me harder than I expected. Under all her cruelty, there had always been a wound. "Elise," I said quietly, "he didn't choose me over you. He just trusted us differently." Her jaw clenched, but her eyes glistened with something raw. "I can't lose this, Lena. I can't." I walked to her desk and opened my laptop, then let me fix it. She stared, speechless, as I accessed the system she thought she'd locked me out of. Within minutes, I rerouted the frozen accounts to stabilize essential operations and presented a revised statement to the bank, not to save her, but to save everything he built. Hours later, I sat at the long conference table again, not as an outcast this time. As the only one who knew how to keep the ship afloat, the bank's legal team dialed in. Words like liquidation, fraud review, and provisional control were thrown around like grenades. Elise's voice shook as she tried to defend herself. But then the lead banker said something that changed everything. Elise froze, all eyes turned to me. I hadn't planned this, not fully, but in that moment I understood what Father had meant about power. It doesn't shout, it waits. The board voted. This time not for Elise, for me. Interim CEO, effective immediately. Elise's breath caught like a sob. She turned toward me with something between rage and heartbreak. "You wanted this," she whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No, but I'll make it right." The room erupted into signatures, legal briefings, handshakes, but all I heard was the steady drum of my own heartbeat. I walked out of that room taller, not because I'd destroyed my sister, but because I had chosen to build when she only knew how to conquer. That night, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the storm-touched city, Elise appeared beside me. She wasn't wearing her mask anymore, just a sister broken and quiet. "Lena," she said softly, "I'm sorry." The wind tugged at my hair, I know. Silence stretched between us, not warm, not entirely cold. Just real. I thought if I pushed hard enough, she whispered, I'd finally be enough. I looked at her, really looked at her, not as the enemy, but as the little girl who once held my hand when we were lost in Father's warehouse. "You always were," I said quietly. "You just forgot who was on your side." She nodded, tears she wouldn't let fall pooling in her eyes. The world would remember the day the bank froze Bastel's $40M credit line. But I would remember it as the day I stopped being the shadow behind Elise's throne. I was no longer just the strategist. I was the leader, and this time no one would tell me I didn't belong.